Welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. 8 o'clock, and I know you're all been waiting patiently for just this bill. So we're happy to hear it this morning. So hope you all came back with less than favorable conditions, right? I mean, or was I the only one? I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one. No, Stacy had to drive those roads as well. So we're just happy to be here. Today, we're going to hear House Bill 74, Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund. This was a bill that was worked during the interim by the Joint Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee. So I think probably our director is going to kick us off. Is that correct? And his best friend. Thank you, Deputy Director, as well.
Madam Chairwoman, Committee, thank you. Darren Westby, Director of State Parks and Cultural Resources. I'm glad you made it in safely. I got a couple people that as soon as we're done with this, they'll be back on the road to get home before they're stuck here for a week. So really appreciate the time, not only today, but over the last year working this bill in the interim, but also multiple years working the funding mechanism for outdoor rec. If you all remember during the interim, we talked a little bit about the bake sale that we've been doing for the last 5-7 years of just trying to find enough funding to get this office up and going. The outdoor rec task force that Governor Meade put together really went through a significant process around the state to try to figure out, get our heads wrapped around this big thing that's called outdoor recreation in the state of Wyoming. And one of the biggest issues was the funding mechanism. And one of the recommendations that came out of this was this trust fund. Now, we've gone, like I said, over the last many years of just trying to put dollars together in our own agency to try to get this office up and running, because we realized the significance of this office and what it can do for the state of Wyoming. And so luckily, over the course of time, we've had some good opportunities, some ideas that have come through, didn't come to fruition. And luckily, this time we landed on one that hopefully will make it to the finish line. The Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund is basically the title on the bill. And Madam Chairwoman, I don't know how much history you want going into where this started, how it came about, but I know 3 of you were on the interim committee and worked it pretty heavily. Senator Baldwin, Senator Jones, I know you're relatively new to this, but you've probably been a part of it in some form or fashion. So I don't want to belabor the fact. I know we have several people in the audience that probably would like to talk as well on how we got here as well. And I can't tell you how much support we've received from people that it's been astounding to me to see, the thought that's been put into the general public as well as some of the associations. And so, Madam Chairwoman, what's your pleasure? I can talk about the importance of outdoor recreation within the state. I can talk about the importance of outdoor recreation within our agency. I can go deep. I can stay high level and let other people dive, or I can walk the bill for you, or what would you?
Director, I think maybe a little bit of background just for our 2 new members. I wouldn't necessarily have to do it. I don't think we have to do a deep dive, but this is the only bill we have today as well. So it's up to you.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. From the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the agency that kind of talks about what industries do for each individual state, shows that the outdoor rec function within the state of Wyoming is a $1.5 billion spur to our GDP in the state of Wyoming. It's about 3.6% of our state's GDP, a little over 15,000 jobs, and about 5.4% of our statewide employment comes from the outdoor rec industry. Just in lodging tax alone, which one of the big shifts between what was worked in the interim to what came out of the House was they took away the funding mechanism that the interim committee did with sales tax, taking a percentage of the sales and use tax and transferring it over to eliminating the sales and use tax out of the bill, but then bringing in the lodging tax, the projects and revenue reserve accounts, sorry. And so I have some numbers about how much the industry kicks into that lodging tax as well. UW said that the economic impact of just the motorized trail users kick in 2.7 million annually in lodging tax. Just ourselves within our camping within state parks, we kick in a little over 75,000 annually. Just outdoor recreation visitors alone, just in general, a little over 13 million annually into the lodging tax. So what, I guess where I was going with all this is what we're receiving in this bill for the trust fund is more than compensated in the actual intake of what the outdoor recreation world does for the lodging tax as well. What did I miss, Dave? Okay. And with that, I'd stand for any questions before we get into the bill.
Questions for the director? No? Okay.
Very good.
Doing well.
It's early on a
It's early.
Tuesday. We'll call it a Monday squared, right? All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chairman and committee. Just going through the bill, the engrossed bill, and as I go through, I'll kind of point out some of the changes that have happened from the interim to now. On the page 1, they just added providing an appropriation in the first section there. Page 2 kind of goes through the titles and definitions. So one of the things is commission. It will be the State Parks and Cultural Resource Commission. Nothing changed there. I just want to make sure that that everybody knows that we're not adding a new board or commission to oversee this program. Defines income account. Infrastructure means facilities, installations needed for the public to enjoy the outdoors. Page 3 goes into the creation of the Outdoor Rec Trust Fund, income and a trust fund account and income account. Talks about that we can receive different types of funds as they come in, not just off of this, but we can receive grants and other contributions. Page 4 goes deeper into the trust fund income account. In here, in the first subsection B, there was a section that the House deleted the time frame and the 50 million threshold to be able to use these earnings. So in the interim bill, it had 2026 as a time frame and 50 million. Whichever came first, we could start using the earnings off the income account. That was deleted in the House side. A lot of that was if they stripped out the sales and use tax. Realistically, the way it was set up in the interim bill was the 50 million would be reached in about 2 years, a little over a year and a half. And so they stripped that portion out. They did add towards the end of subsection B a level in which a project, if it receives more than 250,000, would have to come forward to the body for approval of those individual large projects, similar to the WWNRT with their large project accounts. So at subsection C goes into some specifications of if a person donates to this account, where it can go if it's not specified directly. Page 5, again, all the way through this bill, it talks about subject to legislative appropriations, whether it's by project over 250,000 or by budget spending authority. All of that would be legislatively appropriated. Going down through the subsection D, I, it goes into 80% of the earnings would go out of the 80% of the earnings coming into the income account would go towards granting, putting dollars to the ground. And then 20% would go towards the administration actually running the office outdoor recreation. And so one of the things that they did add in on page 5, line 14, they removed the word necessary. So it used to read of public access easements necessary to enhance outdoor recreation infrastructure. Just for your knowledge there. Page 6 goes into the actual administration duties and responsibilities and reporting by the commission. So the commission needs to evaluate all the applications. We need to annually report to the governor, JAC, and this committee. And we also have to make sure everybody understands how many grants, federal grants, state appropriations, and contributions that we've received into this fund. Also, any of the grants awarded, all the funds that were dispersed will need to be in that report as well. The commission also has to review and monitor all the expenditures, and we also have to adopt rules and regulations within this program for how to grant, what the grant application submittal looks like, the establishment of the criteria for awarding the grants, and determine whether there needs to be any matching or in-kind going towards those grants. Obviously, they'll evaluate, rank, and prioritize. And then the commission may, in subsection page 8, line 7, the commission may consult with other governmental agencies, county, local, county, or municipal governments, persons and nonprofits. The House did take out on line 10, page 8, consult as necessary. They removed the as necessary. It just said you will consult these agencies. And it says that the commission can accept or decline any federal grants, contributions, or grants. Just because people want to give us money, I guess that gives us the ability to say no if it's not appropriate. And the disbursements of grants at the bottom of page 8, talking about application approval, legislative appropriation, commission may award the grants under this section, consistent with the rules. The commission also has the discretion to determine what money is awarded under each grant and any conditions. The other thing that they added, the House added on page 9, lines 7 and 8, the grantee in its application needs to consult with the Game and Fish Department prior to that application. So the intent there was to ensure that we don't have a potential project that's going to run into a critical habitat or a wildlife conflict. And so they added that in. It goes into biennial audits. And then the biggest section, the biggest change was the removal of the state sales and use sections. And then they added in the language that on page 10, section 3, talking about utilizing the Wyoming Tourism Reserve and Projects account, $6 million biannually, recurring biannually, an appropriation that comes out of that tourism and reserve account to go towards the corpus of this trust. And this section 4 is just, it's effective July 1 of this year. And Madam Chair, that's kind of the walk of the bill and the changes, just so you're aware of how things maneuvered over the other side of the hall.
Questions for the director? Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you. Morning, Darren.
Morning.
Question on page 8, line 10. Consult with other government agencies, local, county, municipal governments, persons, other nonprofits. Is there a place in there for some sort of engage in local public process? Or does that appear somewhere else that I missed?
Mr.
Director?
Chairman, I can phone a friend to see what they already have envisioned on that public process, but I'm I know one of the significant things that we're doing right now is a lot of the grants that we're hoping will start coming forward are the ideas that are coming out of the outdoor recreation collaboratives that are going on around the state right now. And so there's a significant public engagement process involved in those. I'm sorry, Madam Chairwoman, Senator, didn't mean to negate that. But so yeah, hopefully a lot of these projects have already been vetted locally. If they haven't, I guess that's where I'll phone the Deputy Director.
Go ahead, Deputy Director.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator DeGrew, Dave Glenn, Deputy Director of Wyoming State Parks, Historic Sites and Trails. Senator DeGrew, you're dead on. The last thing we want to do is parachute in and fund some project that has not been vetted through local communities. And I think this is the piece where that is. There may be a piece, the ability to put something in regarding collaborative work or public process, but that is where this piece sits.
Follow up?
Yes, go ahead.
I've noticed at times that sometimes a project that comes up from a local entity is their great idea. And as it percolates up through, all of a sudden it becomes something, and then it kind of gets onto a life of its own. And then another segment of the public at the last minute, I know you've never seen this story come up, but at the last minute come up and say, hey, this is what we wanted at all. And then all of a sudden we got a whoop-de-doo going. And so I would, at some point in that process between the public organic bubble up and then the final decision, that there's another circuit in that process there, so we can make sure that we didn't get out ahead of our skis. And so that's, any thoughts on that as we go through? And I know I'm not the wordsmith. In this outfit, but something along those lines to try to see if we can't, short circuit that little issue as it comes up, or if you think it's not worth it, or we got it covered, fine. But that's just something that came to mind. Thanks.
Director or Deputy, either.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator, thanks. We're keenly aware of some of those topics that do come up that sometimes spur the other side a little bit. I would hope that on any of those projects, especially if they're on state or federal land, they have to go through a significant process, even probably before they're even granted the award, that goes through a lot of the process of cultural survey, all the deep dives into the public engagement, as well as, just ensuring that we have local landowners in agreement with and for the project. Not a lot, I would say pretty much all of these would have to have significant approval of the landowner before the application even gets submitted, or it would get rejected before that even happens. So we're hopeful a lot of the work up front will negate some of that, but definitely if we see a project that could have some of that hot button topic, it behooves us all to go back out and have more public hearings, just to ensure that we're getting the voices heard, for sure.
Other questions? Senator Jones?
Madam Chair, Director, can you give us an idea of some kind of projects that you're hoping to fund with these grants?
Director?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Jones, it's a large gamut, and I would probably pitch this one off to Dave as well. We had, I guess, when we put out the request for ideas for the ARPA funds, the CARES funding, and all the things that we received over the last several years to try to really spur the need, I guess I'll take another step back. Last year, we kind of came at a different angle to try to get funding for the Office of Outdoor Recreation. It didn't get stymied, but it got halted, and they said, come back and show us a proof of concept that this is necessary. Why is the Outdoor Rec Office necessary? Why are all these projects necessary to the state of Wyoming? Working with the Office of Tourism, we understood that there's a need for more product development within the state, and how do we get more people to come to the state, recreate, and leave? Well, we need more product. We're overrunning some of our areas because there's no, we need to spread them out. Well, how do you spread them out? You add more product and you get them to go where you want them to go. And so we had the opportunity to put a request out for possible projects, and we got $12 million of ARPA funding and $2 million of Office of Tourism funding to grant some of these projects. Well, we got over $72 million worth of requests just in the first application process. So I hope that's a proof of concept that the need is there. And those, I'll let Dave go into kind of the list of projects that we received, but also what we're looking to use these funds for.
Deputy, go ahead.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Jones, great question. If you look on page 2, line 21, we specifically worked with the interim committee to make a very broad definition of outdoor recreation infrastructure. I think a lot of times when people think of, oh, we're just going to build more mountain bike trails or more trails, and that's part of it. But I would throw out, if the community of Rock Springs wants to build an off-road vehicle park, it could be funded through this. If a fairgrounds want to expand their camping, that could be part of this. It could be shooting ranges. It's a bigger, broader array. And we did that on purpose because communities want different things. There's a community in Western Wyoming that doesn't want any more mountain bike trails. They want OHV trails. This would allow them to come in and do that. So we made it as broad and as vague as, not as vague, but as broad as possible. So communities could build what they would like in their area regarding outdoor recreation infrastructure.
Follow-up? Senator Baldwin, do you have a question?
It's kind of a question, Madam Chairman, and I'll try to make it a question the best I can. I'm looking on page 9, small b, small paragraph B, and I looked at the original bill and then looked at this one. And I'm not an English nerd, but I will tell you that's the longest sentence I've seen all year. And I think there's probably a better way to say, and I would ask the presenters as well as the committee to come up with any way around that, because that's a really long sentence. And having read it about 10 times now, it's not, I get what it's, I support it, I get it, but there's a better way to say it. And I would invite everybody, maybe a better way to say it. That's the inner nerd in me saying that. It's poor grammar.
Any
Don't you
comment on
agree?
that? Don't you agree?
Madam Chairwoman and Senator, I agree with your comment that it's a really long sentence. I know in a lot of the conversation that we had on the other side, there was a lot of consternation and concern that they wanted to force us to ensure that we were doing this, and this was the one area that they did that. Obviously, in the other section where it talks that we got as necessary out of there, and it said we will consult with other agencies and other landowners and local, but this is ensuring that whatever we're going to do with these funds is not going to negate anything that the Game and Fish is doing. So from the concept of how to fix it, I'm not an English major, I'm just an engineering nerd, so I'd leave that to somebody else.
I was just going to say, I think Senator Ellis is good at that. Maybe she's got an idea for it. So. No? Okay.
I'll work on it.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Yeah, Senator Ellis.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
My first question is the $250,000 cap, just to walk through that again, how you would determine what a project is, because I could see someone saying, you know, I want this fence improvement for whatever trails, but then, you know, a mile down the way, we also need this access easement, and then, you know, a project. I'm just wondering how you kind of define that so that there aren't attempts to double dip, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way of saying it. And then just some discussion on the appropriation. That is a pretty big difference from this that I see in this bill from last time. So if you could tell us, is 6 million really the administration cost of this bill?
Director?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Ellis, I'll tackle the second question. I'll let Dave tackle the first question. The $6 million biennially that the projects in reserve account will dump into the trust fund is to grow the corpus. The 80% of the earnings, the intent, I guess, back in the day when we were talking in the interim, the 50 million era, or that $50 million figure kind of came out because what we always kind of wanted to do was grant $2 million a year to put on the ground and really try to develop some of these outdoor recreation products. And then about, all right, so if you take 50 million at 5% rough, it comes up to be about 2.5 million. And so that 2 million would go to the ground, and $500,000 of that 20%, 80-20, comes out to be about $500,000 a year would run the actual administration of the Office of Outdoor Recreation. Unfortunately, at 6 million a biennium, it's going to take a while to hit 50 million. So they removed that language that we can't use the earnings coming off that corpus. So we won't be granting, $2 million a year. We'll be granting what we can until that time, and we'll utilize whatever comes out of that for the administration. In the budget that you all are about to pass right now in the supplemental, we were fortunate enough to get some operational funding through the Office of Tourism to get us through until this trust fund can come and stand us up on our own. And so hopefully over the course of the next 10, 15 years that we're getting this corpus built up to that 50 million mark to where it can run the Office of Outdoor Recreation. We have a backstop through the Office of Tourism to just fund the office. So did that help, Senator Ellis? And then Dave, if you want to talk about the
Deputy
250.
Director?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Ellis, I believe the reason the House put this in here, it's not a 200, my impression is it's not a $250,000 cap. It's just if a project is over 250,000, they wanted legislative oversight so they could look at the project and say, yes, this is a good project, you're spending your money well. With outdoor recreation infrastructure, 250K is not a lot of money. So we do envision projects being much more than that, some projects, but it will just need to go through and get your blessing before we put that money on the ground.
Senator Guru?
Well, just to follow up on that, I mean, I seem to recall that you referenced the Natural Resource Trust Fund and how they do theirs. Didn't we just up that to $400,000 as a minimum? I think this is this past year as far as how much money the commission could let loose without having to go in for what qualified in a large project versus small project. So I agree with what your assertion on the 250. For now, maybe that'll just have to work for now because we're talking smaller amounts of dollars, but I got a feeling that'll have to evaporate pretty quickly because those projects just gonna run that. So,
Madam
okay.
Chairwoman, Senator Drew, you're right. I think the Senate did bring forward a bill to increase that threshold to 400. I think it's still in third reading possibly over in the House. But I think it's still intact as we speak. But I think, again, going back to some of the comments that we've heard, not over the interim, but even prior to the last year, proof of concept. Let's give us an opportunity to get some of these things in front of you and show you what we're doing, why we're doing them. As much as I'd love to see the threshold raised, quite honestly, I just want to see the trust fund built and then give us an opportunity to show you as the legislative body that we're doing it right. And then if we're encumbering you guys with a lot of time because our list is, 40 pages long of, larger projects, then maybe you guys would see that as an opportunity to increase that down the road.
Yeah, go ahead, Senator.
Madam Chair, as a follow-up to Senator Baldwin's concern on that paragraph B, it looks like the House added on page 9, paragraph B, they added the requirement to consult with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department prior to application. I'm trying to understand who would it make sense to reach out to Game and Fish? Would it be to the applicant or would it be for state parks? Once you receive the application and say this might have an impact, I'm just trying to sort through who would be better. Right now, I would agree with Senator Baldwin, this really it's not super clear. I think if we wanted to make it clear, we could take that out, and then reinsert it in its own separate sentence, but I'm just wondering who should be the consultor. Would you rather do it, or would it be better for the grantee? And maybe this is a question too for Director Nesvik.
Director?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Ellis, I think regardless of whether the applicant does it or not, we definitely will to ensure that our projects aren't destroying critical habitat or wildlife migration corridors. But it does kind of help up front if the applicant knows and has that conversation. Again, we're hoping that a lot of these projects aren't just coming out of the blue, that they're well vetted up front, which means that they've taken their time and due diligence to ensure that the projects that they're coming up with aren't possibly creating an issue that unforeseen or foreseen, and running that trap line on that. So we'll see. I guess I can see it both ways, the applicant and us, but either way, I can guarantee you our agency, our staff, will make sure that those are consulted with the Game and Fish to ensure we're not encumbering them.
Follow up, or are you good? Any other questions for the director or the deputy director? I just have a couple, just quick ones. When I was looking through the bill last week, just always kind of curious about what does it cost for an easement, to purchase an easement generally? I guess it depends on how big it is, but could you give me an idea, maybe a ballpark figure on that?
Madam Chairwoman, it probably depends on the length of the easement, the width of the easement, the property in which you're trying to cross or what have you. And the one thing I think I would also remind, just on the other side of the house when we were talking through this, I think they were thinking that we were doing conservation easements. These are access easements if we need to have them. We're not conservation easements with this granting program. Do you have any? I think it's pretty vague, and it's probably determinable upon, are you talking about a single track, access? Are you talking about a side-by-side access? Are you talking about equestrian? They're all going to be a little bit different, and have a hard time probably pinning that down, sorry.
It's all right, I was just curious. I figured that's probably what the deal was on it, but the other question I had is, so when it comes time to determine these grants and prioritize them and such, do you anticipate having to appoint like a subcommittee within your own department, or how do you think you'll take those on?
Madam Chairwoman, I think our intent is the Office Outdoor Recreation. Patrick Harrington is with us. He's the manager of the Office Outdoor Recreation. He and his team, he's got a couple other full-time people, and then he's got some seasonal people. And I think when the granting application timeframe comes in, they'll do an initial staff vetting of it, probably not really prioritize, but ensure that it meets the letter of this. And then we'll probably have a subcommittee on the commission as well that work with staff to review and really do some of those interviews, and then prioritize, and then bring that back to the full commission to go over that list. And we do it similar right now with Land and Water Conservation Funds. The Recreation Trails Program does that with the Trails Council, the same concept of those granting programs that we already administer. So luckily we do this type of work, and so we have some decent, frameworks already set in place that we can hopefully not reinvent the wheel. And anything else?
Maybe I could add.
Yeah, go
one
ahead,
thing.
Deputy.
Madam Chairwoman, I have to say this because I think I always do, and I think it's important. I think we have the ability to control our outdoor recreation in the state of Wyoming right now. And we can do that through educating people, dispersing them in certain places, and then concentrating them at times. So when we talk about critical deer winter range or sage-grouse habitat or migration corridors, this is exactly what this bill will help us do. This trust fund will help us do. We can move those people to other locations, still keep them in Wyoming, still have them have fun, let them spend their money and go home. And that's the whole idea of this is steering these people to the places we want them versus just letting them parachute in and go where they want to.
Thank you. Anything else further? All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'm sure you'll be hanging around in case we have any further questions. Okay. I'm guessing maybe Director Nesvik, would you like to chime in now?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a few brief thoughts here. So good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Brian Nesvik, Director of Wyoming Game and Fish. I first wanted to this committee is well aware because you deal with the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust every year. It's certainly that model has worked well for Wyoming's wildlife and Wyoming citizens. and has provided some exceptional opportunity. The whole trust fund model has worked well to be able to fund millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of work across the state. I certainly see a lot of the same, very similar components of this bill that are pretty reflective of how our Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust works. As far as the consultation question, I think that there's value in requiring the applicant to consult with Game and Fish as well as the state agency. I mean, I can tell you that today it would not be conscionable that Director Westby and I would not, or our staffs would not talk about a major recreation project. But I think having both required in the bill is important to Game and Fish. You know, we do have concerns, as do our constituents, about conflicts between outdoor recreation and wildlife. So while there's not any need for Game and Fish to weigh in on a development within an existing small state park or some type of a recreational opportunity, like, for example, at Hot Springs State Park, there would be, and it would be in the state's best interest for consultation with us if there was going to be impacts in the middle of the Red Desert, as an example, where we have a lot of important wildlife values. So I really respect and appreciate that component of this bill. And I know there's others that have differing views on that, but that's certainly where the department is on that. And then lastly, your question, Madam Chair, regarding costs of easements. You know, the commission has the opportunity to purchase easements on a regular basis. And and just as Deputy Director Glenn said, it does range. But as an example, you know, we can obtain a lot of times long-term 10 to 20-year easements across private land for sportsman access for a $10,000 annual payment to $20,000 annual payment. And then a recent example over in your part of the world was the Raymond Mountain Access Agreement. I don't remember the specific dollar amount, but it was actually like a half a mile, 2 miles. It was a very short, Senator Baldwin knows this as well, very short easement, but it gained access into like 30,000 acres of other very difficult public land. And I believe it was around 2 million. It was a pretty expensive easement. There's actually appraisers that do easement appraisals. And so I think the range could be pretty wide and broad. And with that, Madam Chair, I would certainly stand for any of your questions. Questions
for Director Nesbitt? I have just one on page 9, the long paragraph. I'm a little bit like Senator Ellis. It basically says that the commission they shall have the discretion to determine the amount of money in addition to the requirement for the grantee. Right now, it appears to me the grantee has to make the first step to visit with you folks if there's something, but I'm kind of wondering if maybe that shouldn't be adjusted, that language, just a little bit. Oh, Senator Ellis has an idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
Madam Chair, just to circumvent that a little bit, when we get to working the bill, this part on page 9, paragraph B, talks about the commission's duties. If we want the grantee to include that or reach out to Game and Fish, then we need to take out that language about consulting with the Game and Fish. And then we can add some language on page 7. This is what the commission this is where the commission has to write rules. Here they establish the procedures for grant application submittal. They would, with rulemaking, establish criteria for awarding the grant, criteria to require matching funds. We could add some language in there, establish criteria to require an applicant to consult with Wyoming Game and Fish. That way, when the applicant reads this statute, they go, check, check, check. I'm supposed to do all this. So then we can take it out of 9, would be how I'd tackle that.
Any comment on that, Director?
Madam Chair, I think that sounds like a very, a more easy way to understand the intent that I think you all have on this.
Okay. Any other questions for Director Nesbitt? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Director, we have another director in the room. Welcome. I thought you might have, want to say your 2 cents as well. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Diane Schober, the Executive Director at the Wyoming Office of Tourism. These are exciting opportunities when we can really demonstrate and showcase the relationships and the collaborative efforts that agencies do together for the betterment of Wyoming. And certainly in our capacity to grow the impact of the visitor economy to the benefit of Wyoming for our communities and our residents, this is an opportunity to really tackle that. The Office of Tourism certainly has a responsibility, to market the state as a great vacation destination But also within that, we have a responsibility for destination management and destination development. And the way that you really can grow a tourism economy without adding additional visitors is by expanding opportunities and things for people to do. When you can extend that length of stay, you are then increasing the economic contribution of the visitor on that trip. And there are plenty of opportunities across the state of Wyoming. I mean, it was Director Westby did a great job sharing with you the economic impacts of the outdoor recreation economy. Tourism and outdoor recreation are not mutually exclusive. They are very much a part of one another. And so in our strategic initiatives, in addition to championing our destination and our brand, we also have a strategic initiative for elevating our partners and developing destinations across the state of Wyoming. And certainly tourism is built up and has in some areas of our state, but there are plenty of opportunities where we can disperse visitors to lesser known areas. But you have to have something for them to do in order to capture that time and grow lodging tax dollars, food and beverage sales, and other economic impacts. And this provides that. This is really, I think, a bill around not only destination development, but community development and place-based economic development. And so with that, I would just share too that through the reserve fund, which was established in 2020 when the statewide lodging tax bill was passed, of that 3% statewide lodging tax, 20% goes into the tourism reserve and project account. And I think this says two things. You're taking money that's generated from visitors and putting it back into something that can beget more visitor opportunities. And so projects account, this fits perfectly within that. And just, Madam Chairman and members of the committee, just to let you know, as of January 31st of 23, the fund balance in Fund 446 is $6,020,265. Projected revenues between February of 23 through June 30th of 24 is $8 million additional dollars. This session, there are two bills that identify Fund 446 as the revenue source to fund that. This bill and then Senate File 169, the shooting sports complex, which had $2.5 million. This one has $6 million. So then subtracting out that $8.5 million that would be if in these two bills that are up in this session, then you'd start the biennium of 25-26 on July 1st of 24 with a balance of $5.5 million. So that's already accounting for the projects that you have before you during this session. And so just to let you know, I just wanted you to know that there's plenty of funds in the account, and then there will be an anticipated probably another 12 million over that next biennium. That's generated. So the fund is generating 6 million roughly a year. And with that, Madam Chairman, I will stand for any questions that you may have of me.
Questions for Director Schober? Well, you answered one of mine. That was one of the questions I was going to ask is how healthy was the count and basically some projections. So that answered my question. Senator Grew?
Just to follow up. So what I heard you just say then is that by the end of this biennium, we'll be able to have that rolling average and be able to more or less, although we're not quite there yet until you get a 5-year, but at least at the 3-year rolling average of the collections of the lodging tax, what spills over into the project account and just how that's all starting to play out. Is that what I'm getting?
Director Schober?
Madam Chairwoman and Senator Groot, that is true. The funds, the bill was passed in February of 2020 during your budget session and went into effect January 1st of 21. And so now we have 2 years of, so a biennium's worth of collections to use as an estimate. And so we're tracking it with the budget office every month, the Department of Revenue downloading their collections reports every month. And so we're averaging the second year, we were down about 5% over the first year of collections on the calendar year. So, but it does give us a strong indication of what we can do in growing the fund going forward. And we're taking a very conservative approach when we're making those estimates of what would be collected between now and the end of this current biennium. We took last year's collections, reduced it by 5%, as that's what we would anticipate collections would be. So I think we're getting a really good tracking of what that 3% statewide lodging tax is producing.
Other questions, Director? I have just one. Do you anticipate that folks would reach out to you in terms of potential projects that you might be able to, further down the road to the state parks?
Madam Chairwoman, yes, and we currently do. And that's the really exciting part of this is in a program that we launched this year called Destination Development. For all of the lodging tax boards across the state, they could apply for funding to do projects like this, that they could, new initiatives that maybe they weren't engaged in, market expansion, or some type of product development. And so in order to be efficient with this, there are many of those that would cross over and fit very well under this umbrella. Our agency, between Game and Fish and State Parks and the Office of Tourism, that's probably the three agencies that we work closely with them. They work closely with us. We also have a lot of work done with the Department of Transportation. But there is an interagency working group that Director Westby and Director Nesvik and I have encouraged our teams to meet minimum of a quarterly basis in order to just talk about where we can go. That intersection of where our goals and objectives meet, that's the sweet spot. And that's what we really want to try to leverage. And I jokingly said to you this morning that there was the brain trust available in the room. So, but we do pride ourselves on being the brain trust.
I agree. I would agree. Other questions for the Director? No? Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much.
Others in the room that would like to testify, please come on up. Welcome. Even though we know you all, you still probably should introduce yourself for the folks out in, online.
Good morning, Chairwoman Schuler and members of the committee. Chris Brown, representing the Wyoming Hospitality and Travel Coalition. We stand in strong support of the bill. Hospitality and tourism plays a significant role as the state's second largest industry. In 2021, it helped generate more than $240 million in local and state taxes towards our economy. And as you heard from the previous speakers, the best way to not just grow the industry, but also manage the resources to spread people out around the state. We think that the special projects and reserve lodging tax account is an appropriate use for this. And we really feel strongly that this piece of legislation has the potential for real long-term positive effects for Wyoming. The smallest community in the state to the largest community in the state can apply for these grants and help build out the product development in their communities. As you heard the previous speakers mention, a lot of parts of the state have great natural resource or great potential for attraction, but the product just isn't built out yet. And so we really stand strongly in support of this bill and hope that you will as well. I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions for Mr. Brown? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Riemann.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann, and I'm here representing two different interests. The first is as a representative of the county commissioners, and the second as an outdoor recreationist and an author of a guidebook in Wyoming. In both instances, I resoundingly support this legislation. As has been noted on page 2, that definition of outdoor recreation infrastructure is broad. That's intentional so that we can invest in our recreation economy here. As I came at this interim to support your efforts, I came with 4 priorities. One of those being safe routes to school. The second, pathways and trails, which is a personal interest for me. A third was parks and other outdoor recreation infrastructure. And the fourth was to support the Office of the Outdoor Recreation. This bill does 3 of those things, and I'm very proud that you're advancing legislation that takes care of the other. I did want to just talk about 2 pieces that have come up in the conversation here this morning. The first is the requirement to consult with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And I do agree with the director that it's a necessary part of this legislation. I would, however, caution that maybe we look at how that language is structured, because there are instances when consultation may have already happened, say through a NEPA process, with a federal agency. And it seems unnecessary for me to, that an application or an applicant would have to go back through that process. And as the director pointed out, there may be a grant that would go to a park in your community where we wouldn't be necessarily impacting wildlife infrastructure or activity in the state. So I do think we need to perhaps look at that. Senator Guru mentioned the need to engage with the public, and I do agree that that's an important component. But again, I would also caution that there may have been processes that have happened. Again, maybe NEPA is one of those. And so maybe we leave the department some discretion about what processes, what applicants absolutely need to demonstrate either of those and come forward with that. The last point that I'll just mention here is I've heard a lot of talk about investment for our tourist economy, and I think that's important. But the other really important piece to me is an investment for our residents. And I think this bill is that and can do great things for our state. And with that, I would ask that you support it, and I'll be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Reman? Okay, Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I understand what you're saying about the discretion. I mean, if we're just looking at a grant that would involve like a city park, it probably doesn't need Game and Fish's blessing. But what I'm trying to get after is leaving it to the commission to adopt rules so that, or criteria, so they can flesh that out better in rules. So I just want to make sure that you think that, or just kind of a meeting of the minds, that I'm not missing something. If we were to take out that language about consulting with Game and Fish, moving it to the applicant's duties, just saying the commission shall, through rulemaking, establish criteria to require an applicant to consult with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. Then in the rules, they could say, here's where you need to, here's where you don't. But I just want to make sure that that doesn't cause any alarm the way I've got it in my mind.
Mr. Reman?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Ellis, I think we're on the same page there, absolutely.
Other questions? Senator Gru?
Sure, thanks. Jeremiah, I appreciate what you said too about process, and I do agree. A little bit, see how to say this politely, but now I've just been through a couple of these lately where folks, have an idea in their head of a project, and it goes back to my eye of the hurricane thing, where they're in this and that's all they think about is that project, and they love their project and they've got it. And then all of a sudden they just come up and they've got their funding and they're ready to go. And then all of a sudden it becomes public. And then all of a sudden a whole nother group out of here goes, I never heard about that. This is going to have massive impact on my town. And I wasn't even consulted. And when I see consult, like I say, I've seen not our Parks Department, but I have seen other departments in state government sometimes say, well, a phone call, we consulted, they didn't call us back. So somewhere between that, and I was just trying to figure out, I don't want to try to be too prescriptive. On the same token, I don't want that eye of the hurricane to pass over and then all of a sudden we end up with, a whole brouhaha. So that's all I was trying to figure out, where that sweet spot was. And I'm willing to wait. And I hope this is so successful that we amend this bill for the next 40 years with all the great new ideas that come in. That would be a win-win in my book. So I'm okay to let it ride for a while.
Mr. Raymond?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Gru, you and I are on the same page. I'm suggesting there should be some demonstration that there has been public involvement. I would just suggest we don't get too prescriptive in the legislative language here, that we demand that they go through an additional public process whereby they may have already gone through NEPA. And from my perspective, that should be sufficient enough.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Raymond. Welcome.
Hi, Madam Chairwoman, Senators. I'm Sarah Dorenzo. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Economic Development Association. WEDA represents over 200 economic developers, communities, and entities who work to foster economic growth and viability in the state. WIDA is in support of House Bill 74 because it provides a means for consistent project funding to Wyoming's communities as they work to develop their outdoor recreation infrastructure and amenities. In recent years, we've seen the increased visitation and interest in Wyoming's outdoor resource. And this trust fund is a much needed tool for economic developers to meet the demands and develop their own attractions in communities. The value added growth in Wyoming's outdoor recreation industry has increased 28.6% since 2020 and outpaces the US overall. It makes sense to plan for the future and develop a source of funding for these projects. Outdoor amenities are also good for Wyoming's business recruitment and development. The attraction and promotion of the outdoor lifestyle in our state has enabled economic development clusters with gun manufacturing, equipment, and apparel businesses. These businesses want places where their workers want to live, have a great quality of life, and align with their lifestyle. As you heard earlier, the outdoor recreation economy has accounted for 15,285 jobs. Second, bolstering the outdoor economy is especially important for our tiny towns in Wyoming. With the Project Trust Fund, there's potential for communities to leverage their outdoor opportunities for more visitors, and that in turn increases tourism money on lodging, restaurants, and other services. It creates jobs that bring outside money to our communities, which we need. Main Street businesses truly benefit here as well because it promotes the treasures of our towns and keeps them prosperous and viable. The lodging tax we feel is an appropriate mechanism to fund this account and is investing in the state in the way it was truly intended at the inception. So WIDA encourages giving communities the resources and tools that they need. So please support House Bill 74.
Questions? I caught Sarah, but I didn't catch the last name.
Dorenzo.
Dorenzo. Any questions for Mr. Renzo?
Thank you.
I don't. Thank you so much. You know, we have a couple of legislators. Hang on just a second. I know Director Newsom's here. Would you like to testify on this bill, or do you want? Okay. Oh, no worries. How about Representative Western? You good? Would you like to come on up? And then sorry, I didn't see you until just now, so. He's a small guy, yeah, so.
Hard to miss. Thank you, Chairwoman. Obviously Cyrus Western, House District 51. I think there's a lot of good points. I think the good senator's points about making sure public involvement are really important. And right now, with this bill, with the prescriptive rulemaking requirements that it has for the commission, my consultations with the department, that is going to be part of that rulemaking process of having that open opportunity for members from the public, whether it be a hearing hosted by the municipality, by the county, to have that opportunity for both opponents and proponents of these projects to come forward and voice their concerns. Obviously, we can put that in this bill, so it is prescribed by statute. But that's certainly something in my consultations with the department and the commission that is part of the process that they plan on promulgating in their rulemaking process. There was certainly a time where I was opposed to these types of things in my community of Sheridan. Some years ago, there was a pretty big push to make some of these things. And I kind of said, I don't know how I feel about this, kind of want to keep the outsiders out kind of thing. But we built them anyway. And I was really surprised. They get a lot of resident use, a lot of local use. There's plenty of folks who adamantly oppose them. Years later, I saw those opponents and their kids using these trails. And so I think it's something that if we want to recruit these young folks to our communities, and we look at their criteria of livability, those kind of opportunities in outdoor recreation, whether they be walking trails, bike trails, and the other kind of things, whether it be, kind of the shooting range complex idea that was mentioned, those are things that can draw some of those folks in and really enhance that livability factor of our communities. And it's not just the northwest corner, it's Sheridan, it's Cody, it's Casper, it's Cheyenne, it's these other, communities across the state. And so that was kind of the impetus behind the bill. And I'm proud of the work that I did on the House side of getting this through. And obviously it's in your care and consideration. I'm sure you'll do what's best. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions for Representative Western? No? I think you guys have done a great job. We'll try not to mess with too much. But
Thank you.
we may have to put our seal of approval in there, though, somewhere.
Understood.
Just how it is. So thank you. All right, others in the room. Sorry, Jess.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Jess Johnson, Government Affairs Director for the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. And I love the discussion that we've had around this bill. We stand in support of this bill with the inclusion of the wildlife sort of consultation. I think we've seen, and we've all seen in our communities, exactly as the senator was talking earlier about how, you know, it takes one member of the public to say, oh, I didn't hear about this, and it just blows up. We see this consultation between wildlife and the grantee, so the department and the grantee, as early on is actually being proactive for the grantee, so they have this protection to fall back on. It's like, nope, I've already looked. Maybe I've checked twice with them, but I've looked, I've checked all those boxes. And that way we get out ahead of this narrative that recreation is against wildlife. They can exist together. It's smart recreation in smart places, and having that consultation early on is really important. Hunting is recreation, and a lot of these I think will benefit everyone. But that early consultation is a sticking point for the hunting community as we look at recreation. We have to make sure that that happens early, before tempers happen, before a bunch of work happens. All having that right as the impetus as it's going on is going to smooth out everything later, even if there's a sort of double-checked box of like, yep, I've done it all. That way, when we get into communities like the community I'm from, Lander has recently had a dust up, we'll call, over a recreation deal. And, you know, having that early on, even if it happens and you can say they did it twice and you set it on paper, man, it smooths everything out. So I look at the hunting community as being very much in favor of this bill. It benefits everyone in the state, including the tourism side. But we're in favor of this bill only with that inclusion of wildlife early on and pretty strongly there.
Questions for Ms. Johnson? Just one that I have for you. So if we leave that long, long sentence that Senator Baldwin has an issue with, but maybe also mention in the early section here that the State Parks and Rec will also maybe consult. Would you be okay with just leaving it as is, the paragraph that we have some concern with on tonight?
Yes, and I know that the amendment that Senator Ellis had maybe been talking about too had been something we'd talked about early on. In fact, we had worked with the department to bring the amendment that's currently in there. And I think having, as long as it's in there, as long as that consultation happens, we're fine.
Okay, good enough. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else who would like to testify on this bill? Please come forward. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Robert Short, County Commissioner, Commerce County. Thank you very much for the work that you're doing on this bill. In Commerce County, we strongly support this effort to increase access for folks in Wyoming to enjoy the great outdoors. As a prime example, Commerce County did apply for part of the WARG funding. We were part of that $72 million outreach. And of course, we found that it was incredibly important to follow the good senator's advice to reach out to Game and Fish immediately, as well engage in public process prior to even applying for the grant. We also stipulated that it was incredibly important that not only do we start with the public input, but also get public input in the process as we're trying to develop the scope of what we're trying to accomplish to grant access to those folks. Particularly in this case, in a small community in Commerce County, we have a very large county park that was granted to the county in 1927 by the federal government. And that is a beautiful location that's grossly under accessed currently because of non-traditional methods of development. It's been dispersed. We have a lot of garbage there now. Though folks want to protect it, back to the good senator's point, folks come out of the woodwork just hostile that this county commissioner has this project, which in fact, this county commissioner brought forth a project that the constituents asked for. It's not my project, and quite honestly, I think it's my job to represent the voice of the people. I think it's very important for us to continue to disperse these opportunities across Wyoming so that we're trying to influence the economic impact across the state and not just in certain pockets that are already well developed. I think it's very important for us to take into account the opportunity for folks to see this beautiful state and to bring revenue dollars into our state. As was mentioned prior, as a former large employer in Commerce County, those outdoor recreation opportunities are very important for potential employees. They're also very important for existing employees. And if you want to keep your workforce strong, we have to be diverse in what we offer as those extracurricular activities. In my particular line of work, power line construction, that's a rugged individual who comes on to work in 30 degrees below zero and 30-mile-an-hour winds in the dead of night because a storm blew down a power line. They also like rugged outdoor opportunities to have fun. So I very much appreciate the time you've given me, and I very much hope that you will support and push forward this bill. Thank you very much. I stand for any questions.
Questions for the commissioner? Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a clarification, Commissioner. Thank you for being with us today. Does the County Commissioners Association have a position on this bill? I can't remember.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, yes, ma'am, the County Commission Association is in support of this bill.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Others in the room that would like to testify? I believe we have a couple online. Is that correct? Are they still with us?
Madam Chair, there is no one with their hand up right now.
Oh, they changed their mind. And that's nobody else. I'm not missing anybody. Okay. All right, good enough.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
we have Sarah Brown Matthews.
Oh, okay. Bring her on in. Welcome, Ms. Matthews.
Madam Chair, thank you so much for your time, and I apologize, I didn't have my hand up earlier. I was trying to be thoughtful of the room. I represent, my name is Sarah Brown Matthews. I represent several hats, so to speak, in the Albany County community. I serve on the Albany County Tourism Board, the City of Laramie Parks, Trees and Recreation Advisory Board, and as the executive director of a nonprofit that is a collaborative with the city, the county, Wyoming State Parks, the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, the University of Wyoming, Laramie Rivers Conservation District. I'm sure I'm leaving out important partners, but a large collaborative that is working on a project that is hoping to benefit from funding that might be made available through this bill. I would only add to the conversation that I see across the state numerous groups like ours, communities that are trying to really thoughtfully do some community planning and utilize the wonderful outdoor recreation and wildlife resources in our communities. Laramie's is a little bit unique in that we also were trying to protect the overlay area of the Casper Aquifer, which provides the majority of our drinking water in Albany County. So by working in collaborative natures in projects like this, we're able to solve numerous community planning goals for our region. But the hardest thing truly is to come up with infrastructure funding. We know the word is out there that southeastern Wyoming is a wonderful place to come and visit and recreate. And we want to encourage people to do that, but we also want to follow the ethic that in fact, infrastructure isn't necessarily for the users, it's for the landscape. It allows us to protect those areas that we want to conserve as wildlife winter ranges, as corridors, set aside areas for hunting and sports recreation aspects that might not be necessarily interesting to the bike rider or the horseback rider, but provide a broad variety of resources and do it in a way where we're really funneling our visitors into the areas that we'd like them to be in and to use the land in a way that is gentle and appropriate for the landscape. So I appreciate this committee's willingness to listen to this thoughtful conversation today and encourage you to vote in the positive for this legislation. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Mrs. Matthews or Miss Matthews? Well, thank you. You're a busy woman. So appreciate those of you out there in the public that are willing to serve in so many capacities. So thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Anyone else online? No? For real this time. Oh, okay. All right. Nobody else in the room? With that, we'll go ahead and close public testimony. Okay, it's been moved by Senator Baldwin. Second by Senator Grew. I think he beat you just barely, so. All right, let's take a look at the bill and see if you have any potential amendments or anything that you have comments or questions about. Okay,
Madam
Senator
Chair,
Ellis?
I would move to amend on page 7, after line 23, insert a new Romanet 4 paragraph that would read, establish criteria to require an applicant to consult with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, semicolon. And then on page 9, lines 7 and 8, delete to consult with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department prior to application and. Yep. Page 9, lines 7 and 8, starting with the word to consult, strike the rest of that sentence. And then line 8, strike everything except the word to at the end of the line.
Do you want her to go over again on section, on
Yep.
page 7? Do you want her to go over that
And then
again?
that would be establish criteria to require an applicant to consult with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department.
You got that down, Doreen? Okay, you're so speedy. Okay, let's go ahead and any discussion on those changes? Discussion? No? Oh, he loves it. Okay. All those in favor then of that amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that amendment passes.
Madam Chair,
I love it too.
page 8, line 10. After the word other, insert state or federal. And then after the comma at the end of the line, insert tribal governments, comma. So the line would read, consult with other state or federal governmental agencies, comma, tribal governments, comma, local, county, or municipal governments, persons, etc.
Discussion on that amendment? Yeah, I think that's actually a good catch, so. All right, let's go ahead and vote on that amendment. All those in favor of that particular amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that amendment passes. Did you have a chance to get that one as well? Okay, you are so
Madam
efficient.
Chair, and just a conforming amendment on the first amendment we just adopted on page 8, line 2, that would be renumbered, that Romanet 4 would be renumbered to 5.
Be a 5, okay. Any comment on that? Okay, I don't think we need to vote for that. Okay. Anything else? Any other amendments? Any other discussion on the bill? Anything? Yes, Senator Grew.
Yeah, discussion on the bill. You know, it was mentioned, I think it was Jeremiah, Mr. Riemann, who talked about not to lose the piece about this that involves local people in addition to just tourism. And I couldn't agree more. When I come from a town that, when I moved there, our average stay was 1 night, 1.1 night, and today the average stay is 6.7 nights. I can tell you that all the amenities in the town where I live in are, while they're for the tourists, they're all enjoyed by the local people. And that includes recreational opportunities. And they've grown exponentially. And with that is provided great opportunities for business and for locals and tourists alike. It also brings challenges of interface with different types of recreational tourists, whether it be horsemen versus bike riders versus ATVers versus hunters. And I think we address that. But it's also, make no mistake, it's also economic development. It's what the communities, it's what I call the stuff that makes a community livable. That makes, you know, you call it quality of life, and we use better terms, but I just like stuff. It's just the stuff that people like to do when they're off on a Saturday and go. But making sure that the Game and Fish is at the table, that we take these things into account, and we do this upfront planning, in that public engagement to make sure that we're covering this. And it's like, I've learned so much over the years by doing this, about how this interfaces with trapping, because then you start to get off in the forest. Now, all of a sudden you got to get a bunch of some of our older citizens who like trapping, and they say, wow, now all of a sudden you're taking dogs and now they're getting stuck in traps, and the trapper folks want the traps gone. And, you know, so all these things have to be brought into account. And it's, as long as you get it done up front, it can be done. And so that's why I'm very excited about this, because all the people in this room that I'm looking at, I know can affect that. And so, you know, I look forward to this journey together. So on and for the bill.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted a quick comment, and that if you haven't read your emails this morning, there is a ton of opposition to the bill. And we're going to hear, you know, why are we spending this money? And I will say why I want to spend the money. And that is, this is an investment in the state, and it's an investment that will have returns. We may not see them right now. We may not see them for 5 years, but it's an investment in the state. And I think that's important. We shouldn't just spend money anywhere and everywhere, but we need to invest in our state, because it's going to make a difference to what's here for us and for our kids and our grandkids, et cetera, down the road. And so this kind of bill is important to me, and I think it's a big deal. And I think it'll be important to explain that on the floor. Because I know when I read my email this morning, there's, you know, as a citizen of Lincoln County, you know the sequence, how it goes, and that there's a ton of opposition that don't want us to spend money. So I think it'll be important to get out there. I'll certainly be willing to stand up and support that. But I think this kind of bill is what we need to be doing. So just want to make that comment.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like the feature of the bill that makes sure that an applicant has epidermis in the contest. So
And I would just add also, to kind of piggyback on what's been said, we talk a lot about our young people. What can we do to keep them in our state, or you know, bring them back after they've maybe got some education or certification, or, you know, different things of that nature. And I just think this is the deal. And I know last year when our state parks folks took us out to Kurt Gowdy Park, and we got to hear the statistics of just what it did when they expanded their bike trails, just that alone. And the amount of people that it caused, you know, as an increase in that park. These are the kinds of amenities that our young people, our millennials and our Gen Xers, they like this kind of stuff. If they're going to go to a small town in Wyoming because this is where a job is, they want to be able to recreate. And so whether it's bike trails or ATVs or horse, you know, trails or whatever it is, they want these amenities. And I think that's an important thing to talk about, and not just our locals that have lived here all our lives, but to try to get our young folks back in the state and make them a part of what we're doing. So I'm definitely in support of it. So any other comments? Okay, question on the bill. Please take roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 74, Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund. Senator Baldwin.
Aye.
Senator Ellis.
Aye.
Senator Guru.
Aye.
Senator Jones. And Chairman Schuler.
Aye.
Ma'am, we have 5 ayes on an amendment.
Okay. House Bill 74 has passed the committee, and we'll take it up to the Senate, and
Who
hope
would
we
you
can
like?
get a good outcome for us. So
Who would you like to present on
who
the
would
floor?
like to? Who would like to? Anybody? I would be happy to if
Thank
no one
you.
else would volunteer.
our chairwoman, it's a big bill.
Be happy to do that.
Epidermis in the game.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Meeting's adjourned.